last Monday's gardening session with the product owner was painful. The main thing in it that was painful, or the issue, was our human factors research folks had been doing research around one of the particular stories, specifically around acuity, and the data they were getting back from end users was in direct conflict with the priority that the story was placed in by the product owner. And we had a discussion around that prior to the gardening session that didn't go well either. And so we really needed to get clarity around that issue, if this should be or should not be a priority. So in going through the gardening session, when we got to that particular story, I suggested maybe we needed to take this offline into a separate discussion. But I think that because I had already opened the door, we went in. And so that's where we started to annotate some of the data that was driving what we were talking about. We weren't overly emotionally affected by giving the data, but I think that it came across to the product owner that we were trying to disprove her ranking. And so what ended up happening was she said she didn't want to discuss it anymore and didn't want to argue about it anymore. We just needed to get it done. In which case, I felt it was too hot to handle, so we did what she said and moved on. So had we thought about it prior to and done some detailed planning, maybe thought through what sort of responses we might get from the product owner, that would have went a lot better. Or we could have chosen to move the story someplace else as a separate discussion point, so we're not all blindsided by this issue, or something. There might have been some other options to take that might have been much better for dealing with it. Yeah, this past Monday we had the gardening session as well, and in that we did some significant preparation around that, as well as role play, where two teammates basically one played the role of the product owner, asking me targeted questions and exploring what the responses might be and figuring out a strategy on how to address those, with the goals of Pomiet being in mind, the project, and getting things moving forward. We also covered in detail around strategy for getting business reasons around annotating those on the stories, as well as having a bounds around what we were going to discuss. What was the scope of the discussion going to be? So setting those criteria helped tremendously, because there were to-dos for the product owner that I stated up front. Today we're going to go through the stories, and we do have these ranked, many of these are ranked, but we don't have the reasons why they're ranked that way. And having them go through that exercise set in motion a pattern that allowed us to kind of move through things and capture the value. So when we come back 2 weeks from now, we know why it's ranked the way it is. It's just much smoother. What are the key things that came out of the gardening session, or out of the role play that I hadn't put in place prior to? The key things were, one, having a scope around the discussion. Second was setting parameters for estimating the business value, helping the product owner understand what that relative scale is in light of what we've already done. So comparing one story to another as far as business value, and allowing them to get a range of relative value, setting that range. Just helping them through that, to think through that, as well as gathering the rationale behind that ranking. To me, that was all very important, as well as just continuing to ask questions, thoughtful questions, and having those prepared beforehand. that is really the way it needs to go. It really helps tremendously. So we really were not blindsided during that meeting. For a new lead coming on board, the top two things I would say they need to be aware before their first gardening session with a product owner would be to plan out in detail how the meeting should go, right? According to the Pomiet principles, but also in light of what we know works, right? So the role play is very important, and depending on the personality of the product owner, you may need to do more than less of that. And then clear communication. I mean, that really is critical, I think. And that's the whole leading into having thought through what the responses might be, having that prepared, how you're going to say it. That's just really important.